This happened 2 months ago. I lived in a 2-room apartment space in a subdivision. The previous owner of the space is a personal friend of mine who was out during one of his business travels, also because his lease was up and he was planning to move anyway. During the last month of his contract of the apartment, he let me stay and be caretaker of the space because he still had some important stuff like papers and files in it. And I was looking for a place to stay in the area because of my new job. Nothing really happened in the first week. The other tenants were nice. I talked with them when we met on our way out or when I was hanging laundry. I even made a connection with the girl I liked 2 rooms from mine, so I felt fine and safe. My friend, by the way, had 3 CCTV cameras installed. My friend is a super paranoid guy because of his job. Each camera pointed at a specific direction. One facing the gate and the recreation area, where tenants can sit or smoke or chill or whatever. Another facing the outside door of the apartment rooms, and the last one facing the side of the building because there is a back door. And my room was on the side of the building too. During breakfasts, I would play some of the footage because there wasn't any TV in the room. One day I played the footage as I ate my breakfast. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just a couple of stray cats and some of the tenants going out the back door during late hours because some of them worked graveyard shifts. I skipped forward a bit, and on 3 a.m. some person came in and stopped. He just suddenly stopped and stood still in the middle of the walkway. This woke me up pretty hard as I watched it, because I really am not a morning person. I skipped forward a bit more to see if he was just drunk or high or someone who might have entered the wrong building or if he was planning to rob or case the place. But he didn't do anything. He just stood there for almost an hour. Then I realized he was standing just outside my room window. My blinds were open at the time because it was hot. Note, I was the only person on this side of the apartment who had their blinds open. So this guy was watching me while I sleep. I got scared watching this because I was alone at the time. When my friend came back, he was shocked when he saw the footage. I also told the landlord, and they called the police to do some investigating. They never found the guy, and the police said he didn't do anything serious. Trespassing, but nothing major. Still, this incident makes me uneasy every time I sleep at night. By the end of the month, my friend's lease was up, and I moved out to another apartment that I share, thankfully, with another friend of mine. This one is more secure because it has 2 guard dogs. Even now, I still am very paranoid when I sleep in a room with a window in it. I used to live in Brooklyn, New York, and had a job at a head shop. I was about 19 and fairly naive. I'd been in an abusive relationship for a number of years and had terrible self-esteem. That being said, I enjoyed our customers. They were usually really chill and had some pretty great stories. I closed the shop most nights and always worked alone since we were just a tiny business with 5 employees total. A guy came in about 10 minutes until close looking for a new pipe, and I helped him out as you do. He paid, thanked me, but didn't leave. I was trying to get my shit done so I could leave, but of course, I couldn't count the drawer or anything until he was out of there. He was just standing in the corner near the door, staring at me. This went on for a couple of minutes before I asked him if I could do anything else for him. His response really creeped me out. "You could cut my face. I'd like that." I was noping so hard. I told him he had to get out before I called the cops. He pulled out a tiny pocket knife and laid it on the counter, begging me to at least prick the skin on his arm. My boss had installed a silent alarm underneath the counter the last time the shop was robbed, and I was pressing that thing like my life depended on it. Probably did, actually. The guy was becoming more and more agitated, yelling at me that I was a bitch just like all the other girls. We were all whores who'd fuck anyone who wasn't him, and that if I knew what was good for me, I'd cut him. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. The cops got there in about 5 minutes and the guy was arrested for aggravated harassment. I was 11 or 12 and just arrived at home after a day at school. As per usual, I dumped my book bag on the floor next to the door and went straight to use the toilet. I finished up as normal, then went to the computer, looking forward to playing around on Neopets.com like the average kid of my age. I flicked on the computer screen, and my heart jumped into my throat. My desktop wallpaper had been changed to an image of a female's leg, naked except for black lace-up heel and covered in blood. There were hundreds of images saved to the desktop of gore and extreme BDSM scenes. I didn't know if there was still someone in the house with me, and I bolted out the door and called the police and my parents. According to the police and the computer search history, someone had broken into our house just minutes after we all left for the day. Spent all day looking at porn and gore images up until when I came home. They had still been in the house while I was peeing, and must have used that moment to bail. They were never caught, but needless to say, we moved soon after that. The story benefits from a little bit of background, so let's start with my freshman year of college. I met Emily via my freshman orientation group. We were both theater majors, and eager to make friends and feel less awkward and alienated in the overwhelming flurry of early university life, and got on quite well. She was maternal and gentle and sweet, always going out of her way to make sure everyone was doing all right and felt included. We spent the first few weeks of that year hanging out in my dorm room, watching cartoons and YouTube videos and talking. We had a ton of common interests, and I was really happy that I had met her. However, as freshman year went on, Emily's sweet demeanor started cracking. Emily and her roommate Beth lived across the hall from me, so I got to be close with Beth as well. Beth would confide in me about the weird and upsetting things Emily did. She would randomly start sobbing and scream at Beth whenever she asked if she was okay, belittle Beth in front of other people. One week, we had 2 fire drills in a row because a girl in our hall's hair straightener set off the alarm. Emily started loudly screaming about how this girl's straightener should be taken away from her, and how she's an awful conceited bitch, right outside of said girl's door. Beth told Emily to calm down, and this offended Emily so much that when Beth got back from class that afternoon, Emily had constructed a cardboard partition between her half of the room and Beth's. This behavior culminated with me and my freshman year roommate standing outside of Emily's door one night, having to talk her out of slitting her wrists. We should have called the cops that night. It would have saved us years of trouble. After that suicide attempt, though, Emily started to shape up. Me, Emily, Beth, and my freshman year roommate Kitty decided to all live together in a suite the next year, since we all got along so well. Sophomore year went quite smoothly. Junior year, this year, the 4 of us were going to live in a house together. However, a month before we were to move in, Kitty sent us a text message saying that she couldn't live in the house for financial reasons. It smelled fishy, but what could we do? We got another roommate, Roxy, who was going to share a room with Emily since the house had only 3 bedrooms, and Beth and I had claimed the singles. Emily started causing problems as soon as we'd all moved in. She was ridiculously anal about cleaning, literally screaming at us and throwing things if we left a grain of rice in the sink or an empty coffee cup on the counter. She rearranged the fridge at 3 in the morning, in the process throwing out a lot of my food. I confronted her about it when I realized most of my groceries were missing, and she said, "Oh, I thought they were mine and had gone bad." She then proceeded to give me an absurd amount of money to replace the groceries, far more than I would need. She constructed a 30-item chore chart for us, telling us to do everything on it every day. This behavior, coupled with her penchant for coming home angry from her job and screaming and throwing things around, regardless of whether we had guests over, drove Roxy, Beth, and I to the point of insanity. We confronted her about it, which culminated in a big fit of angry screaming and tears on her part. She got in my face and screamed at me for an hour, but eventually, we decided we would try hard to keep the house cleaner for her, and she would be less threatening and abrasive all the time. We had about a week of happy, family-like living before shit really hit the fan. One Saturday in mid-October, we spent the afternoon decorating our house for Halloween. It was great. Emily had to go to work, but she said she would be back at 11 and we could watch a movie together. I was charge artist for a play at the time, so I had a ton of painting to do. I spent the rest of the day painting, and was still working in the theater at 4 in the morning when Beth, haggard and clad in pajamas, showed up. Worried, I asked what was going on, and she simply said I needed to come home right now. Something was up with Emily. As we walked back to the house, she explained the situation. Emily had staggered through the front door at 3:50 a.m. She stumbled up to the room she shared with Roxy, where her banging into walls managed to wake Roxy up. Emily began screaming and tearing off all of her clothes, yelling variants of, "I want to kill myself. I want to die. Someone kill me." Butt naked, Emily got onto her bed, still screaming and crying about wanting to die, and began spanking herself. The spanking went on for about 15 minutes, while Roxy laid there in the dark, horrified. Finally, Emily collapsed, moaning and sobbing. Her moans eventually subsided, and she passed the fuck out, completely unresponsive. Roxy gathered up her blanket and pillow, ready to sleep downstairs for the night, when she met Beth in the hallway. She explained what had happened to Beth. The two of them tried to wake Emily up, shaking her, turning the lights on and off, calling her name, but she was totally unconscious. They were worried, and that's why they came to get me. I was worried too, given Emily's history of suicide attempts, and the fact that she said she'd be home at 11 to hang out, but instead stumbled home at 3:50. When they went downstairs, they saw that Emily had pulled up the Game of Thrones DVD menu to the words, "Winter is coming." And as goofy as it sounds, we wondered if it was a suicide note. Emily would do that kind of thing. There were small pieces of paper and pairs of scissors all over the floor. I tried to rouse Emily when Beth and I got back to the house, but she was out. She was breathing faintly, but her body was cold to the touch. We called an ambulance just to get things checked out. We were afraid Emily had tried to overdose, or she had mixed something else with alcohol and reacted badly to it. She got crossfaded once and spent the night throwing up all over herself. We tried to dress Emily before the paramedics arrived, but gave up due to her being dead weight. However, in the process of trying to sit her up so we could get some clothes on her, we noticed that her ass was covered in oozing red welts from how hard she had been spanking herself. She woke up while the paramedics were examining her, and drunkenly explained to them that while she had a history of depression, no, she'd never kill herself. The paramedics told us that we were good friends for having them come to check her out, but she was just hammered and needed some time to sober up. They offered to take her to the mental hospital to be on suicide watch for the night, but we said we could watch her. We were just so relieved that she was only drunk. Another decision we would come to regret, as it were. We were sitting in the living room after the medics left, when Emily stomped down the stairs, face twisted in an inhuman expression of horror. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" she screamed. She was zipping a black jacket over just a bra. She proceeded to scream at us for 2 hours while we tried to explain our rationale. Roxy explained to Emily how she had been spanking herself and screaming that she wanted to kill herself. "I do want to kill myself," Emily replied. "There isn't a second of the day that goes by that I don't want to die." Roxy and I, having both dealt with severe depression for most of our lives, tried to explain to Emily that she should get help. There was no reason to keep being miserable all the time when antidepressants and therapy were options. In response to this, Emily crawled across the floor on all fours and wrapped both arms around my leg. I was sitting in the chair and she was on the floor, both arms wrapped around the joint of my knee, squeezing so hard it bruised. Digging her fingers into my flesh, she delivered a rehearsed-sounding monologue about how over the summer she had stood by the highway, willing herself to jump in front of an oncoming 18-wheeler. But, she concluded with a bitter laugh, I just didn't want to ruin their night. She started trying to provoke all of us into anger, telling us how that if we were passed out and unresponsive, that she'd be a good friend and not call the medics for us. She proceeded to tell us how we were monsters, and how waking up to a medical examination was like being raped. I was getting so angry about this that I excused myself to my room, afraid I would react violently if I stayed down there any longer. Emily came into my room about an hour later. When I went up to her, knife in my pocket, just to be safe, she grabbed me by the neck and started kissing me on the mouth, around my face, breath reeking of vodka. She squeezed the flesh on the nape of my neck, digging her fingernails into me, began telling me how she had resented me ever since freshman year. She hated that I was pretty and likable and talented, and that I wasn't constantly miserable like her. She hated me since the day she met me, just pouring abuse on me while she continued to hold me and kiss me against my will. I managed to push her away, and she told me she was going to move out, which I said was a good idea. She finally left my room and went down to the living room, where despite my being upstairs in my room, with the door closed, I could hear her simultaneously sobbing and cackling. It was a ragged, pained crying, then turned into a wicked witch-like laughter. She began spanking herself again so loudly I could hear it like it was happening right outside my door. Though I couldn't hear this, she also trashed the living room, punching and breaking our window blinds and throwing paper and furniture all over. The icing on the cake, though, was that she took a 10-inch serrated carving knife and cut deep, crooked gashes all over her arms and legs. She then stuck the knife, still covered in her blood, in the dishwasher with the rest of our dirty dishes. Roxy, Beth, and I consulted our landlord the next day. It took Emily about a week to get moved out, and in the meantime, we went to the police, got a restraining order against her, and spent a few days living in protective housing in an unfurnished basement. We're back in the house now, sans Emily, and we've had the locks changed. We haven't interacted with her since, and I hope I never have to. A few weeks ago, she did try to run Roxy over the crosswalk, but Roxy fortunately escaped. And though we told the police, not much has happened. It was a pretty horrifying experience. Definitely left us all pretty traumatized. I really hope Emily gets help, but, well, I'm not going to be the one that gets it for her.